Welcome back to part 3 of my video rambling unscripted reviews of the latest selections from the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction from the September-October 2020 edition. For this portion of the review, I'm talking about the following 3 stories. You can find time codes for the exact locations of those reviews in the description below if you wish to skip to any of them. Do AIs Dream of Perfect Games by Angie Peng, The Dog and the Ferryman by Brian Trent, and The Fairy Egg by R.S. Benedict. Moving things out of frame. Angie Peng's Do AIs Dream of Perfect Games is a story about a girl who loves the game of baseball and is hoping that this particular pitcher manages to pitch the 24th perfect game. And in the process, she is at the game in person and manages to swap out the upcoming batter's lucky bat, superstitiously causing him to lose that game. And so she is subsequently contacted by a mysterious godlike AI that is trying to figure out if the code of the universe has somehow been corrupted through her actions, and assures her that by the end of its debugging, she will remember none of this. So she's sort of hit with all of the existential questions. What does any of this matter if it's all a simulation? That sort of stuff. And then she's in the process of her memory being rewritten. She's trying to write a diary entry, which the AI clearly rewrites after the fact to say something along the lines of, perhaps you should find your own meaning. It's a story that is sort of charming in its simplicity and its humor, and it's, certainly not an original topic. There are many storytellers that have tackled this concept has been tackled infinitely, and I sort of hate to say that I don't think it brings anything particularly unique to it. Aside from, some charming dialogue, some charming approaches to coding and things like that. There's a whole passage of the AI running debugging scripts on the universe and things like that. Certainly this has been, the most common pop culture reference you could possibly make would be the Matrix. The one that comes to mind for me is a game called Star Ocean Till the End of Time, which is not a particularly well-regarded game, but I love it, which is also about sort of the known world being a simulation and all the characters heading outside of the universe to attack and dethrone God. So, quite a frequently discussed topic in the world of video games. But anyway, so it's a charming little short story. It's a little humorous, but I think it's a little it lacks a little bit of depth, I think, for me anyway, and it lacks any bringing anything new to the conversation. But anyway, that's that little short story. Just a final comment on Do AIs Dream of Perfect Games. There's a funny bit in there about mosquitoes. So if you want to, I would say that's my best positive comment about this, is there's a very funny bit about mosquitoes in this little story. I don't remember what story I was going to talk about next, or at least I can't find it in the book. Where is it in the book? I don't look at the table of contents clearly enough. So The Dog and the Ferryman. This is another story that I unfortunately, couldn't relate to initially very well, as I'm not a dog person, I'm a cat person by my standards. But anyway, this is a story about Charon, the ferryman of the river Styx in Hades, in the far future, where people just don't show up in Hades anymore. And instead, it's been so long that Charon is just coated in dust, and then awakens to find that there's a soul waiting for him to ferry, and it is a little dog named Buster. Through this story, so he brings the dog to Hades, and Hades says, why aren't there any humans here? Perhaps you should go to the world of the living and see what has become of them. And so there is a bit of a fish out of water thing that I thought was actually pretty unique about this story. Kind of interesting is that so this dog, the story of this dog is that its owner was hiking along the mountains, and the dog got caught on something and lost, and eventually ended up dying and going into the river. And Charon, through this process, just brings it back. So more than anything, this is a cute little story. Nothing particularly serious or deep to it. But as Charon enters the world of the living, what I, as the reader, initially assume is that, oh, this is going to be Charon from Greek mythology being transported to modern day. And it is, in fact, the far future, where the idea of the human-pet relationship has completely changed, that humans can just sort of essentially exist indefinitely in these enormous pyramids of technology and experience simultaneous realities and have no real need for physical existence, and they have a derogatory term for living like a human being again. So I thought that little glimpse into a future that is also somewhat related to the sort of sci-fi of the Matrix, the plugging everyone into a simulation, into a dream world that is supposedly better than their natural existence, is kind of an interesting little way of presenting the character of Charon. You know, initially it is you, the reader, who does not relate to Charon, the sort of omnipotent immortal of Greek mythology. But then about halfway through, there's that turning point where Charon becomes the human, and everything around him is very alien. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It's not a heavy story, that's for sure. But it's charming, and if you're looking for something that has a dog that reminds me of, so the dog speaks in all caps and in very simple sentences. It is hinted that the dog is the soul of Kerberos, and I couldn't help but think there's this review of a video game called Nier Automata, where there are these little floating pods that are book shaped, and the reviewer gave them the voice of text-to-speech robots, and it's very hilarious. And all I could think of this entire time is this dog talking in a text-to-speech voice, because it's in all caps, and just very, I just imagine it as being monotone and loud the entire time.
A smart dog and a good dog, and I have identified a malfunction in your cognitive abilities. You must help me as I fleeing a small mountain habitat with a large sum of intellectual credits which require your immediate deposit. I do not have long, friend, so please your urgent response, and have a nice afternoon from your good boy Buster Mountain Dew Banana Daniels.
So anyway, that's just a funny side effect of the way it is presented, but anyway.
Sleep well, my dear lovely fair, and in your warm blanket.
The final of the three stories is The Fairy Egg by R.S. Benedict. Now this is a much heavier story than The Dog and the Ferryman. I've been thinking about this one all day since I read it earlier, and I find this one a hard story to recommend for a few reasons, but also that this is sort of a story that is the antithesis of what I've been looking for in this volume, which is that it is very much a story about things that are going on right now, and I'm looking for something that is not about any of that. As you know, right now we are sort of in a situation where people are more connected to what is going on right now than ever before. And so for a story to come along and simply draw upon those things, and comment in a very moralistic way that doesn't particularly add a whole lot to the conversation, is something that I find hard to get invested in. Now, not to say that any of this story was poorly written. There is a very, very well written horror to the whole thing. I would say a horror tinged with like the darkest comedy imaginable. But yeah, I did find that a little difficult to enjoy in sort of anything other than simply, yeah, that stuff's out there and it's gross and it sucks. So what I mean by all that is that the story is about a young woman who is working in a grocery store and lives in a trailer park with her husband, who is older than her, and is a complete moron, and was disabled in a car accident and is no longer working. Spends all of his time on the internet, on a website that is reminiscent of like Reddit and 4chan, and is getting radicalized by trolls. Because he's a moron. And she, in the process of trying to support him and her own life, is looking for ways out of her grocery store job. And she's raising these chickens that her mother had. And one of them is beginning to lay a bunch of dud eggs that have no yolks. And a woman at the market begins asking about, an affluent upper middle class woman is asking about locally sourced eggs, and she says, "Listen, I gotcha." And she doesn't quite have enough eggs for 2 dozen as requested, and drops in one of those eggs, and is initially frightened that she has to admit that this is a bad egg, and instead twist that around to say that this is essentially the black pearl of the bunch. It is the rarest and therefore better egg, the fairy egg, that is said to possess a fairy within it, a monster within it, or whatever. And so this as the story goes along, she's sort of using that door-to-door salesperson method of like, ooh, tell your friends that I've got fairy eggs, I've got the golden goose. There's a bit of that Jack and the Beanstalk kind of thing going on there. And meanwhile, she's becoming further and further distanced from her husband, who's getting more and more obsessed with these bizarre online conspiracies and ways of thinking and detoxifying your life, sort of Alex Jones style stuff. And it sort of leads to her downfall, as the thing that her way of talking about the fairy egg is that the fairy egg could birth a spirit of some sort. And she encounters this spirit, essentially the Earl König, from the Schubert song and the German mythology of the elf king, the fairy king who comes to take away children to die in the forest. And at the end of the story, she has gotten to a point where her double life of being a poor person, completely distanced from her life there, and faking a life of affluence to sort of appeal to these also moronic upper middle class white women, catches up to her, and she is spirited away by the Earl König. So when I say that this is a difficult one to recommend, it is partially because even though this is sort of, trying to take a fairy tale approach to the subject, the antagonists of the story, her husband, slowly getting radicalized by people on the internet, and these upper class people are just so cartoonishly idiotic and villainous that it's hard to take any of it really seriously, at least for me. And I say that because I listen to a podcast called The F Plus, where terrible things are read with enthusiasm, and they love to dig into these horrifying corners of the internet and find the people who are saying the exact things that these trolls are saying to this guy. And so I can say first, sort of, I guess this is secondhand. This is 1 degree of separation removed, but obviously those things are out there, and obviously those people are saying the exact words that are put into the story. But as far as a real hard-hitting point to the story, I think it kind of weakens it by its aggressive realism, because this stuff is so ubiquitous right now. It's sort of making a point that everyone is saying, and that's kind of my biggest concern with the story, and why I find it difficult to recommend is it's too real, man. But if you are going to pick up this collection, then I actually, despite the fact that I don't like the story, I would recommend that you check it out and make your own opinion of it, as it is an emotional story, to say the least. So anyway, that does it for part 3 of my reviews. I'll be returning in the next part with the 2 remaining novelettes, The Shadows of Alexandrium, which is the cover story of this volume, accompanied by some really excellent artwork, which is also the thumbnail for this video. And the novelette My Name Was Tom by Tim Powers. Hope to see you again in part 4, and thank you again for watching.